Hard work never made anyone rich. My family, we come from a family of hard workers. Most of my grandparents, they were in Florida, and the only work that they had available was domestic work. And they were hard workers. And they had homes and all of that, but they just were never rich. But I will tell you, what will keep you poor is stopping 3 feet short of where you want to go. And that happens so much, is that people get discouraged. It gets too hard. It actually gets harder at the end than it is in the beginning. And that's when most people give up. There's a story that was in the Think and Grow Rich about Are You Darby's uncle? And it was during the gold rush. And he found a piece of land. He got gold fever. And he went out and he saw some land and he saw some gold. And he was so excited. So he went back and he got his family and relatives all to pitch in so that he can get the equipment that he needed so that he could mine for gold. So he came back and they started finding gold. And they started finding gold. And their hopes were up, like, wow, we struck it rich. And then what happened was the gold dried up. They couldn't find the gold. They kept drilling and drilling and drilling, week after week, drilling and drilling and drilling, and nothing. And they got so discouraged, but they kept drilling. Like, this was our dream. I had all our family and relatives chip in for us to get this gold and become rich. I can't give up now. And finally, what happened? He gave up. And he sold the land and the equipment and all that to someone, just a regular person. And they did something different. They got the equipment and then they hired someone who was a specialist in how gold faults are in the land, in the ground, and how you can detect where there's gold. And he found out that Darby's uncle had stopped 3 feet from gold, 3 feet from being the richest he could ever imagine. And that is the lesson that we all can learn from that. Where are we stopping 3 feet from gold? Where are we stopping? Where is it that something in us keeps us sabotaging our efforts 3 feet from gold? And this is something that is very prevalent, because Stanford researchers say that most of the abandoned golds die, guess not at 10%, 20%, 80% complete. Most people give up. That is a forgotten place that most people don't realize. And then they start something else, or they find some shiny object here. And if they had just stuck with it, another 20%, they gone 80%. Could they stop? They stopped 20% before achieving their goal. We have invisible rules, and those invisible rules are belief systems that were instilled in our brains at a very young age. And they limit us, and they keep our foot nailed to the ground. And it has us perpetually giving up on ourselves, giving up on our goals, when you have the potential, you have the ability to make the kind of money that other people are making. You see people around you doing it, and you're wondering, why not me? I see it every day when lawyers it's time for them to raise their fees, but when it's time to bill, they cut off a lot of the billing because they're afraid the client will go away because they charge too much. So they undercharge, they under-earn. And then they're doctors, because the way medicine and the government and the fees are arranged today, many doctors need to find a separate way to make income besides their medical practice. Too many of them give up and just struggle through being a doctor after going through 12 years or more of school, and they're struggling financially. So picture yourself with your morning coffee under your nose and the phone in your hand, and you have an opportunity to do something that's really great. But rather than pursue that, you'd rather scroll on the internet, you'd rather talk on your phone or text, rather than take a look at an opportunity. My grandmother was a woman who had utmost integrity, and she put up with a lot of crap. It was during the 30s and the 40s and the limitations, and she worked for really wealthy people in Glencoe, in Chicago. These were white families, and she might be the nanny or the cook or something like that. And she was a no-nonsense. She knew what she wanted, and she wanted to pay off her house. And she and her husband, they would go to northern Glencoe, different places in the north, upstate New York, and they would serve, and they squirreled away their money because they wanted to pay their house off, and they wanted to have a place to retire. And I remember seeing my grandmother, and the house was like a dollhouse. It was immaculate. It was so clean, and they scrubbed the sidewalks every day and planted flowers and made sure everything was just totally pristine. I remember one time I was at her house, and I grew up in a house where you just kind of leave stuff around, and I had a Coke or a soda, and I left it on the table, and my grandmother had a fit. You're in my house. We don't leave stuff around like that. And I said, oh, but I didn't know how to be in a pretty house. That's what I said to her. She laughed. But that was my grandmother. But she didn't give up on herself. She didn't give up on her dream. And we have so many more opportunities than they had back then. All of us have so many opportunities. And so are you going to allow your invisible rule to have you stop? 3 feet from goal? That's the thing you want to ask. What is it that's holding you back? You will benefit from telling yourself, I will not let my invisible rule hold me back anymore. Please subscribe to our channel and we'll see you soon.